Think you can just walk away? I'll ruin you." Derek's voice thundered as he burst into the dining room. I sat frozen at the table, my fingers clenching the edges of my breakfast plate. To anyone else, this mansion screamed of wealth and success, pristine marble floors, walls adorned with priceless art. But to me, it was a cage I couldn't escape. To the outside world, I lived in luxury. Inside, I was a butterfly with clipped wings. His words echoed in the spacious room, but I had to stand my ground. "You can't control me forever, Derek." "Oh, you think so?" He leaned in, his face inches from mine. His eyes were cold and calculating. "What makes you think you can survive without me?" His words were a chilling reminder of how deeply I was trapped. Each day was a struggle to maintain composure, knowing full well that Derek's manipulative grip on my life was tightening. We had once been in love, or at least I thought we were. But those days were long gone, replaced by a harsh reality. Derek's anger flared over the littlest things. A misplaced document, a social mishap. Everything was met with his fiery temper. "You think anyone else will take you? You're nothing without me." My heart ached every time he belittled me, yet I found strength in the resolve building inside. My silence was no longer a sign of surrender but a tactic for survival. Still, in moments like these, standing up to him felt like a small but significant victory. He knocked the back of the chair, sending it tumbling to the floor. I didn't flinch, outwardly playing the part of the composed wife. Inside, adrenaline coursed through my veins. "I have connections, you know," he continued, voice low but threatening. "One word from me and you're finished." I took a deep breath, shaking a little. "There was once a time you spoke kindly, Derek. What happened?" "Life happened, Emma," he spat. "You wanted this life, remember?" Once upon a time, I believed in the dream he sold me. A vision of love and prosperity, where my ambitions as a small-town girl from Ohio could flourish in the big city. But over time, his charismatic mask slipped, revealing the domineering tyrant beneath. I stood up, my chair sliding back with a loud scrape. "I wanted a partnership, not a prison." Derek chuckled darkly. "Prison? Is that what you call this? Some would kill for your lifestyle." I picked up the fallen chair, setting it back in place. "What good is luxury if you're miserable?" His chuckles stopped, replaced by a cold, silent stare. "Remember, Emma, you're nothing without me." With that, he stormed out of the room, leaving me to collect the shattered pieces of my composure. I looked around the room, etched in marble and gold, yet devoid of warmth. The walls seemed to close in around me, reminding me daily of the life I once dreamed of, now turned nightmare. I drew in a deep breath, thinking momentarily about the days that brought me here. Days filled with hope and ambition, now lost to Derek's control. If only I had listened to my parents. They warned me about the dangers of big city charm masking ruthless intent. Dreams of success led me here, but it was the nightmares that kept me. Now I had to find a way out. I needed a plan, allies, and most of all, the courage to take my life back. This was only the beginning of my stand against Derek, and I vowed I wouldn't back down. As the door slammed shut, I whispered to myself, "This ends now." Moving from Ohio to Chicago was supposed to be my big break. I remember the day I told my parents. My mom, Martha, had her doubts. "The city's no place for a girl like you, Emma. You have everything you need right here." "But Mom," I argued, "there's so much more out there. Opportunities, adventures." Dad gave me a silent nod, a man of few words but filled with the quiet strength that always pushed me forward. "If it's what you want, go for it." The city was as daunting as it was exciting. I juggled 2 part-time jobs while trying to squeeze into the fast-paced world of business and networking. Long shifts and sleepless nights became my routine. I seemed out of place at first, a small-town girl learning to run with the big dogs. Every day felt like a test. But I pressed on, determined to make my mark. Then I met Derek. It was at an upscale networking event, held in one of those swanky hotels where the chandeliers almost outshine the stars outside. I was a bundle of nerves, trying to play the part of the polished businesswoman. Derek approached me with a charm that felt like pure warmth in the cold, glittering crowd. "You look like you could use a drink," he said, handing me a glass of champagne. "First time?" I smiled nervously, taking the flute. "Is it that obvious?" He laughed, a sound that would later haunt me. "A bit, but you've got the passion. I can see it." Our conversations were endless, his words painting vivid pictures of success and partnership. The more he talked, the more I felt seen and understood. For the first time, I felt like I belonged. Derek was a self-made man, or so he claimed, who understood the struggles and triumphs. "Come, let me show you the city," he urged one night after dinner, the lights of Chicago glittering around us. "I want you to see what's possible." Serenades beneath the skyline, gifts, and promises filled the whirlwind romance that followed. I was dizzy with the rush of it all. A small-town girl flung into a bustling metropolis, swept off her feet by a man with seemingly endless resources. One evening, after an exquisite dinner at a five-star restaurant, Derek took my hand, his eyes gleaming with determination. "Marry me, Emma. Let's conquer the world together." I was speechless, my heart pounding. It felt like a dream, too good to be true. "Derek, this is so sudden." He squeezed my hand tighter, his smile softening. "When you know, and I know we're perfect together." The proposal was public, extravagant, and irresistible. My doubts drowned in the sea of his assurances. I said yes, and the rush of that moment made everything else fade away. The wedding was a monument to opulence. Every detail screamed perfection, from the delicate, hand-sewn lace on my dress to the lavish spread of food that seemed never-ending. Family and friends gathered under crystal chandeliers, watching as Derek and I exchanged vows that now felt like a lifetime away. In those moments, staring into his eyes, I believed in the future we built. Yet, not long after, the illusion began to crumble. Derek's charm started to wear off, revealing cracks in his golden persona. The man who once whispered sweet words of love and ambition now spoke with a sharp edge. "You're not trying hard enough," he snapped one evening when I expressed concerns about his latest business venture. "Do you even care about our success?" The cracks widened with each passing day, exposing rifts that words alone couldn't heal. The man who promised to elevate me had slowly begun the descent into a controlling tyrant. But at that point, it was too late to turn back. I glanced at the glittering city outside the window, remembering the hope and excitement that once filled me. Now it felt distant, almost unrecognizable. Nonetheless, a small spark remained inside, a reminder of my past dreams. Little did Derek know, this nightmare would soon turn to his. Life after the wedding was a blur of elaborate galas, high-stakes business meetings, and a ceaseless need to maintain appearances. Derek's charming facade began to slip away, revealing a colder, more controlling side. The man who once promised to conquer the world with me now seemed intent on conquering me. One evening, I was in the kitchen, trying to prepare dinner. Derek walked in, surveying the scene with his usual air of superiority. "That's what you're making, again?" His tone was dripping with disdain. I looked up, my hands trembling slightly. "Yes, Derek, you liked it last time." "Liked it?" he scoffed. "I tolerated it. You should know the difference by now." I bit my lip and turned back to the cutting board, my heart sinking. As I continued chopping, I could feel his eyes boring into me. He loved making me feel small, insignificant. "You never get it right, do you?" he snapped, knocking over a bowl of vegetables. "It shouldn't be this hard? Are you even trying?" His words stung, but I kept my head down. Any response would only fuel his anger. Days turned into weeks, and Derek's behavior worsened. He scrutinized everything I did, finding fault in even the smallest details. When I suggested we see a counselor, he laughed in my face. "Therapy? That's for weak people, Emma. We don't need some stranger meddling in our business." But deep down, I knew it wasn't our business. It was his. His control over every aspect of our life became more apparent with each passing day. One night, I decided to confront him. "Derek, we need to talk," I said as he walked in from yet another late night at the office. "About what?" he asked, not bothering to hide his irritation. "About us. About how things have changed." He threw his jacket onto a chair, loosening his tie. "Changed? How exactly?" "You're different. We're different. You're always angry, always criticizing me. This isn't what I signed up for." Derek's eyes darkened. "Maybe you need to change your expectations. Marriage isn't some fairy tale, Emma. It's work." "I know that," I countered, my voice wavering, "but it shouldn't be like this. We shouldn't be like this." He crossed the room in swift strides, stopping inches away from me. "Listen, and listen well. You don't get to decide how this marriage works. I do. You think you have any real say here? You're wrong." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "This isn't love, Derek," he sneered, his lips curling in contempt. Love is a concept for the naive and the weak. Grow up, Emma. Weeks later, concerned after hearing about Derek's temper during the holidays, my parents called. Sweetie, are you sure you're okay? Mom's voice held a note of worry. I'm fine, really, I lied, glancing over my shoulder to make sure Derek wasn't around. Just busy with life here. Emma, you know you can always come home, Dad added softly. I know, Dad, but this is my home now. My words felt hollow, even to my own ears. As Derek's control tightened, my resolve grew stronger. I began to see the man I loved for who he really was, a master manipulator consumed by his own ego. My initial efforts to fix our marriage became a desperate scramble for survival. Collecting bits of evidence on Derek's unethical business practices became my new focus. I started documenting everything, keeping detailed records of his deals and transactions. It was a small rebellion, a secret act of defiance. Each note, each email saved, was a step closer to my freedom. Every day was another opportunity to observe, to gather more clues about his crooked activities. If Derek was going to keep me in this golden cage, I would use it against him. This nightmare had to end, and I was determined to break free. Derek's financial downfall began slowly, like the rumble of a distant storm. At first, it was subtle. Muted phone calls, late nights at the office. But soon the cracks in his empire grew too large to ignore. Derek, why are these bills late? I asked one evening, shuffling through a stack of past-due notices. He glanced at me, irritation evident. It's nothing, just a temporary setback. A setback? I held up the red envelopes. This is a bit more than that. He snatched the papers from my hand. I said I have it under control. Don't you trust me? His words were laced with anger, but also a hint of desperation. I could see the strain in his eyes, the cracks in his confidence. Of course, I trust you, I lied, choosing my words carefully. I just worry sometimes. Worry about yourself, he snapped. I don't need you poking around in my business. But it was clear Derek was no longer the unstoppable force he once seemed. His businesses began to crumble, and he became increasingly erratic. One night, he came home, a shadow of the man I once knew. His clothes were rumpled, his face drawn. They're pulling out, he muttered to himself, pacing the room. Who is? I asked cautiously. My investors, he spat. Bunch of cowards. Derek, maybe there's something we can do. Maybe if we... Stop, he yelled, throwing a glass against the wall. Just stop. You wouldn't understand. This is bigger than you, bigger than us. I flinched at his outburst, but held my ground. We're in this together, remember? His eyes narrowed. Together? Now you care about together? You think you can help? You're just as useless here as you are everywhere else. His words cut deep, but they only strengthened my resolve. Derek wasn't just drowning, he was dragging me down with him. One evening, as Derek stumbled through another business call, a plan began to take shape. If I could gather enough evidence of his underhanded deals, I could tear down his empire and build a case against him. I started reaching out to people, old friends, former employees, anyone that might help me understand the depth of his deceit. Lydia Green? I said hesitantly into my phone. It had taken me weeks to get a hold of her. Yes, who is this? Her voice was guarded. Emma Larson. We met a few times when you worked for Derek. I need to talk to you about... everything. There was a pause. Why should I help you? Because I know he wronged you too, I said, my voice steady. And because you deserve to see him fall. Lydia hesitated, then sighed. Fine. Meet me at the coffee shop on 5th Street tomorrow at 2 p.m. When we met, Lydia was a wealth of information. Derek has been using company funds for his private ventures, she revealed, shaking her head. He's been hiding it from the board for years. Her eyes flashed with anger. He's ruined lives, Emma, but people are afraid to stand up to him. Not anymore, I said firmly. We gather the evidence, document everything. We bring him down together. The plan was formidable, but my resolve was unwavering. If Derek could manipulate his way to the top, I could surely expose the truth. The next step was to find more allies, people who would help me build the case against him. As I walked away from the meeting with Lydia, a sense of determination washed over me. Derek's empire, built on lies and manipulation, was about to crumble, and I would be the one to watch it fall. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Derek was ruthless, and I would need to be careful. But each step forward was a step toward my freedom, and no matter how tight Derek's grip, I was getting ready to break free. The fight had only just begun. The days that followed my meeting with Lydia were intense. Every moment alone was dedicated to piecing together Derek's downfall. I pored over documents, combed through emails, and spoke with more of his disgruntled employees. One name came up repeatedly: Jake Mathers, Derek's biggest competitor. Meeting Jake for the first time was daunting. We arranged to meet at a small, discreet cafe, neutral territory for both of us. As I walked in, he was already seated, sipping a coffee. He stood up when he saw me, offering a firm handshake. "Emma Larson," he said with a nod. "I've heard a lot about you." "Jake Mathers," I replied, squeezing his hand. "Thank you for meeting with me." He gestured for me to sit. "Let's get straight to it. Lydia mentioned you have some dirt on Derek." I nodded, opening my bag and pulling out a thick folder. "He's been cooking the books, funneling company funds into private ventures, among other things." Jake's eyes widened as he flipped through the evidence. "This is significant. Why are you doing this? I thought you were his loyal wife." I took a deep breath. I was once. But I can't ignore what he's become. He's controlling, manipulative, and he's hurt too many people, including me. Jake closed the folder and looked at me intently. "You want to take him down, and you need my help." "Exactly," I replied. "You have the business acumen and the resources. We can expose him together." "All right," Jake said after a moment, leaning back in his chair. "But know this, if we do this, there's no turning back." "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't ready," I asserted. Jake and I began meeting regularly, forming a strategy. We collected testimonies from former employees, built a case with forensic accountants, and crafted a plan that left no room for Derek to weasel out. Back at home, maintaining a facade of normalcy was painful. Derek's temper flared more frequently as his businesses crumbled. One night, he came home drunk and belligerent. "You think I don't know what you're up to?" he slurred, pointing a shaky finger at me. My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady. "What are you talking about, Derek?" "Spending so much time out, meeting people. Don't think I haven't noticed." He staggered closer, his eyes bloodshot. "I know you're trying to betray me." I swallowed hard, staring down. "Stop being paranoid, Derek. I'm just trying to help." "Help?" He laughed darkly. "You can't even help yourself." His words were a cruel reminder of my supposed powerlessness, but I refused to let him see my fear. "Maybe, if you weren't so busy destroying everything, we wouldn't be in this mess." He grabbed my arm, his grip tight and painful. "Careful, Emma. You're treading dangerous waters." That night, I hid the folder with damning evidence in a secure place. It was a risk, having it so close, but it was also a reminder of my mission. I wouldn't let fear deter me. Derek's empire was shaky, and with Jake's help, it would soon crumble. The next morning, I met Lydia in a park, away from prying eyes. "How's the plan coming?" I asked as I handed her a coffee. She sipped gratefully and nodded. "Jake's all in. He's already leaked bits to the media. Derek's struggling to keep a lid on it." I felt a surge of satisfaction. Good. The more pressure, the better. "We need to be ready, though," Lydia warned. "Derek won't go down without a fight." "I'm ready," I said, my voice unwavering. As I walked away from the park that day, I knew we were close. Each step brought us nearer to the moment when Derek would finally face the consequences of his actions. The stakes were high and the danger real, but I was prepared to see it through. For too long, Derek had controlled my life. Now, it was time to reclaim it and watch him fall. The tension in the house was suffocating. Derek's paranoia reached new heights with each passing day. He was convinced that enemies surrounded him, but he never suspected the biggest threat was right under his nose. One evening, I received a text from Jake. "Ready for tomorrow?" I typed back quickly, "Yes." The plan was set in motion. Tomorrow, we would expose Derek at a critical board meeting. I just had to survive the night. Derek was at his desk, a scowl etched on his face. Papers were strewn about, and the air was thick with his frustration. "Damn it!" he shouted, slamming a file shut. I approached cautiously. "Anything I can help with?" He looked up, eyes burning with anger. "Unless you can make $500,000 appear out of thin air, no?" I stayed silent. Offering advice would only enrage him further. I retreated to the kitchen, my heart pounding with anticipation. The next morning, I dressed carefully, choosing a professional outfit that exuded confidence. I needed every ounce of strength for what lay ahead. Derek eyed me suspiciously as I grabbed my bag. "Why so dressed up?" he asked, his voice laced with skepticism. "Board meeting," I replied simply. I thought I'd look the part." He grunted, not entirely convinced, but too preoccupied to dig further. I left the house, trying to keep my breath steady. Jake met me in the lobby of Derek's company building. "You ready?" he asked, his face serious. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, my voice steady despite the nerves roiling inside me. We walked into the boardroom together. The room was filled with powerful men and women, all waiting for Derek. Moments later, Derek barged in, oozing his usual arrogance but with a hint of desperation lurking beneath. "All right, let's get started," he commanded, dropping into his seat at the head of the table. The meeting unfolded. Derek laid out his usual bravado, attempting to mask the deteriorating state of his empire. But the murmurs and discontent were barely concealed among the board members. Jake stood up, interrupting Derek. "Before we move forward, there's something critical we need to discuss." Derek's eyes narrowed. "And what would that be, Jake?" Jake glanced at me, then turned to the rest of the board. "Derek has been hiding significant financial discrepancies. We have concrete proof." Derek laughed, a hollow sound. "Dad, this is absurd. Just another attempt by a rival to discredit me." I stood up, my hands slightly trembling, but my voice firm. "It's not absurd, Derek. It's the truth, and we have the documents to prove it." I handed out copies of our evidence: false transactions, misappropriations, and unauthorized deals. The room erupted into chaos, voices shouting over each other. Derek's face went pale, then red with fury. "You traitorous bitch!" he screamed, lunging toward me. Two board members restrained him as I stepped back, my heart pounding in my chest. Jake raised his voice above the din. "The evidence speaks for itself. Derek has not only jeopardized this company, but also the livelihoods of everyone involved. It's time to vote on his removal." Derek struggled against the hands holding him back, his eyes filled with rage. "You think you can do this to me? You think you'll win?" The vote was swift and decisive. The board members, tired of Derek's tyranny, chose unanimously to oust him. As they escorted him out, his threats echoed through the hallway. "You haven't seen the last of me, Emma. I'll destroy you." But his words fell on deaf ears. I knew that this was just the beginning of his downfall. Jake approached me, a satisfied smile on his face. "You did it, Emma. We did it." I nodded, the weight of what we'd just accomplished settling in. "Thanks to you and everyone who believed in bringing him down." As I walked away from the building, a sense of liberation washed over me. Derek's empire was crumbling, and for the first time in a long while, I felt free. The journey wasn't over. Derek would try to strike back, but I was ready. I had found my strength, and I wasn't going to let it go. The wind had shifted, and this time it was in my favor. The aftermath of Derek's ousting was a whirlwind. News spread quickly, and his once loyal supporters jumped ship. It was like watching a dam break. All the lies and manipulations he'd built over the years came crashing down. Derek didn't take it quietly. He stormed into our house that night, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "You think this is over?" he bellowed, slamming the door behind him. I stood my ground, calm but alert. "It is over, Derek. You've lost." He moved closer, his face twisted in anger. "You think you're tough now, huh? Think you can just ruin me and walk away?" "I'm not the one who ruined you," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "You did that to yourself." With a snarl, he grabbed my arm, yanking me toward him. "You don't know who you're messing with. I will destroy everything you have." I met his eyes, unflinching. "You already tried, and you failed. It's time to let go, Derek." His grip tightened painfully before he shoved me away. "You'll regret this," he hissed, storming out again. The following days were tense, as Derek tried to cling to the remnants of his power. But every attempt to salvage his reputation was met with resistance. The evidence we'd revealed was too damning, and the board refused to reinstate him. Legal actions were looming over him like a dark cloud. In the meantime, Jake and I worked tirelessly to ensure that the transition of power was smooth. We spent long hours at the office, reviewing contracts, meeting with stakeholders, and planning the company's future. "You did an incredible job," Jake said one night after a particularly grueling day. "Thanks," I replied, exhaustion evident in my voice. "It's been worth it, though." He smiled, his admiration clear. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Emma." Those words stuck with me as I navigated through the chaos. With Derek out of the way, I started to rebuild my life. I found a small apartment downtown and moved out of the mansion that once felt like a prison. Jake and Lydia became more than just allies, they were friends. Lydia was a constant source of support, and Jake's presence was a grounding force. One evening, as we wrapped up another meeting, Jake looked at me thoughtfully. "You should come by the new office," he offered. "See the changes we're making." "I'd like that," I agreed, feeling a sense of closure as I looked ahead. Derek's threats didn't disappear completely. He made a few desperate attempts to contact me, but I never responded. Legal proceedings took their toll on him, and he slowly faded from public view. His fall from grace was complete. In my new apartment, I began to plan my next steps. Freedom felt strange, yet exhilarating. I pursued business ventures that I had put on hold for years, reconnecting with my passions. One afternoon, while setting up my new home office, I received a message from an unknown number. The words were simple. "He's hit rock bottom." I stared at the screen, the finality of it sinking in. Derek was done. There was no satisfaction in his suffering, only a sense of finality. I chose not to reply, deleting the message instead. Reflecting on everything, I realized that revenge hadn't been my true goal. It was freedom, pure and simple, the power to live my life without fear and to pursue my dreams without restraint. I called my mother, eager to share the news. "Mom, it's over. Derek's done." There was a pause before her voice, filled with relief, responded. "I'm so proud of you, Emma. You've come such a long way." "I have," I agreed, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "And I'm just getting started." As I hung up, I looked around my new home, feeling a sense of peace. This was my space, my life, my future, and I was ready to embrace it with every ounce of strength I had found within myself. The fight was over, but the journey had just begun. Setting up my new business felt like planting a garden after a long winter. The seeds of my ideas, once dormant, were now bursting with potential. With the help of Jake and Lydia, I rented a small office space and began assembling a team. The air buzzed with excitement and purpose. One evening, I was settling into my new place when Jake dropped by. He handed me a bottle of champagne. "To new beginnings," he said, popping the cork. We clinked glasses, the bubbles sparkling in the dim light. "To new beginnings," I echoed, savoring the taste of freedom. Lydia came in, carrying a stack of papers. "We've got the final contracts for the new client," she announced. "This is huge, Emma." I looked over the documents, disbelief mingling with pride. "Unbelievable. We're really doing this." "Yes, we are," Jake said, his voice full of conviction. "You're driving this ship now. How does it feel?" "Terrifying and thrilling," I admitted, but in the best way possible. Our company launch was a modest event, held in the very office where I had planned Derek's downfall. It seemed fitting. Friends, clients, and family gathered, filling the space with laughter and chatter. Jake raised his glass. "Here's to Emma, for her courage and vision. May this venture be everything she's dreamed of and more." Cheers erupted, and I felt a tear slip down my cheek. "Thank you all for being here," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "This wouldn't be possible without your support." After the event, I found a quiet moment on the terrace, looking out over the city that had once seemed so intimidating. Lydia joined me, a smile playing on her lips. "Thought you might need a breather," she said, leaning on the railing. "Yeah, it's a lot to take in," I confessed. "You did it, Emma. You faced your demons and came out stronger." "I couldn't have done it without you and Jake." "Speaking of Derek," she said, her tone shifting. "Did you hear? He's filed for bankruptcy." I nodded. "I saw the news. It's surreal." "Does it bother you?" she asked, eyes searching mine. "No," I replied slowly. "It doesn't. He made his choices, and now he's dealing with the consequences." Lydia's phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen. "Looks like Jake's causing a commotion inside again. I better go check on him." We shared a laugh as she went back inside. Alone again, I let the silence wash over me. I had come full circle, from a lost and controlled woman to someone who had regained power and purpose. A few days later, as I was going through some old boxes, I found a note from Derek. It was from the early days, filled with promises of forever. I read it one last time and then tore it up, letting the pieces fall into the trash. Just as I was about to leave the office that evening, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. I hesitated but answered it. "Emma?" The voice was weak, strained. "Yes, who is this?" "It's Derek." My heart skipped a beat. What do you want, Derek? I need help, he stammered. I have nowhere left to turn. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange mix of pity and resolve. Derek, I can't help you. You need to find a way to help yourself. There was a long pause. Please, Emma, just hear me out. I've heard enough, I said firmly. Goodbye, Derek. I hung up, feeling a sense of closure. The following day, I finalized plans for our new project, excitement bubbling within me. Jake and Lydia joined me in the office, their energy infectious. Ready to take over the world? Jake joked. Absolutely, I replied, confident and sure. As we gathered around the table to strategize, I knew this was just the beginning. I had faced my past and forged a future filled with promise. The unseen chains that once bound me were finally broken, and there was nothing holding me back anymore. The sun set behind the city skyline, casting a warm glow over our plans and dreams. Together, we were unstoppable, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. How dare you show your face here? I hissed as soon as I caught sight of Alex sauntering towards me across the school parking lot. My hands clenched by my sides, nails digging into my palms. Alex slid his sunglasses down his nose, his mouth curling into a satisfied smirk. Well, if it isn't my darling ex-wife Meredith, you're looking tired. His gaze raked down my body. I refused to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. What do you want, Alex? Can't I walk my daughter into school? He mocked offense. Our daughter Lila peered at Alex from behind me, unimpressed. She was wise beyond her 7 years when it came to her father. You didn't even call her on her birthday last week, I said sharply. So let's drop the devoted dad act. Alex's smirk faded. Before he could retort, a sleek black SUV pulled up beside us. The driver's door swung open and Ethan stepped out, tall and impeccably dressed. I felt a rush of relief at the sight of my husband. Everything okay here? Ethan asked mildly as he moved to stand beside me. Lila immediately went to him for a hug. Alex's lip curled derisively. Oh, look, your white knight has arrived with his fancy new car. Too bad money can't buy taste or erase your seedy past. Ethan tensed, but a warning glance from me made him hold his tongue. I refused to indulge Alex's juvenile jabs about Ethan's privileged background. Not that it was any business of his. You should leave, I said coldly. Instead, Alex gestured at Ethan's SUV with its Delmont Foods logo. I see you clawed your way to the top after all. Then again, sleeping with the boss has always been your specialty, hasn't it, Meredith? Red-hot anger flooded me. How dare Alex throw cheap accusations at me when he was the one who had destroyed our marriage? But before I could spit out a furious retort, Ethan gently squeezed my shoulder. Actually, I'm not an employee. Ethan's voice was calm and steady. I was just named CEO last month when my father retired. So technically, this is now my company. Utter shock flashed across Alex's face. It gave me a rush of vicious satisfaction to realize he'd never known Ethan came from one of the wealthiest families in the state, inheriting a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Alex had only ever seen him as another junior executive at Delmont. Alex's mouth opened and closed, uncharacteristically lost for words. Ethan gave a thin smile. Yes, my trust fund alone could buy and sell you a dozen times over. Not that I make a habit of flaunting my family money. He flicked a piece of lint off his impeccably tailored suit. I just wanted to make one thing very clear, Alex. You are not welcome here. This school, this town, it's my territory now. Stay away from my family, or you'll regret it. Alex paled, shrinked back. Without another word, he turned and hurried away across the parking lot. I let out a long breath as we watched his retreating figure. Well then, Ethan slipped an arm around me. I'd say that's enough drama for one morning. Despite everything, I found myself smiling. No matter what storms we weathered, as long as I had Ethan by my side, I knew I could survive anything Alex tried to throw our way. When Ethan said he wanted to grab coffee after dropping Lila off at school, I readied myself for the talk I knew was coming. Ethan took a long sip of his latte, then set it down and turned to face me. So, you and Alex, and me too for that matter, all worked at Delmont Foods when you met, and the rest is history. The very short version of history, I said softly. Well, let me tell you a quick story on my end. Ethan leaned back, holding my gaze with his steady, pale eyes. You started as an assistant about 6 months before I rolled up from California, another recent MBA grad hotshot, hungry for my first real corporate job. One day the CEO himself takes me out on the Delmont yacht as a perk. And there you were in this tiny bikini. I felt myself flush at the memory. My God, how young and foolish I'd been. Barely 26, vainly trying to land a higher-up boyfriend and climbing up the food giant that was Delmont. Honestly, Meredith, I liked you immediately. You were smart, scrappy, vivacious. Ethan shrugged, almost shyly. But I could also tell you were unavailable. A few discreet questions revealed you were dating hotshot young marketing exec Alex Karev. I winced inwardly at Alex's name. How naive I'd been back then, too, imaging us the perfect corporate power couple. If only I could travel back and warn my past self not to ignore all the red flags. Anyway, I tried to move on and focus on my own career, Ethan went on. But, funny enough, here we are 10 years later, exes with Alex and married instead to each other. Ethan raised an eyebrow, softening his words with a wry smile. I chuckled despite the maelstrom of emotions stirred up by this stroll down memory lane. Here we are indeed. Who could have predicted this is where life would take us? I reached across to squeeze his arm. Lucky me, though. Ethan covered my hand gently. I like to think we both got lucky in round 2, Mir. His voice turned somber. But now I think it's time you told me what really went down between you and Alex. I sighed, old hurts rising up from long-buried depths. Honestly, Ethan, I don't know if I have the full story even now. He changed, slowly at first, stayed out more for drinks with the guys, networked aggressively like his life depended on it. I was scrambling to build my own career too, though, so maybe I just didn't want to see the signs. I shook my head at my own willful blindness. Back then, I just wanted the success, the status, the money. I was willing to ignore too much in exchange for that glittering dream. In hindsight, he was clearly cheating on me for months before I caught him with his assistant. I swallowed hard. It was the biggest cliché punch in the gut, and I wasn't even that shocked, just numb at my own stupidity. Oh, Meredith. Ethan's voice was gentle. Don't blame yourself. Alex made those choices. I wanted to make it work at first. I stared into my coffee, remembering those wretched attempts to salvage things as Alex grew ever more brazen with his affair. But when I got pregnant unexpectedly with Lila, it pushed me over the edge. I filed for divorce when I was 8 months along. Ethan blew out a long breath, shaking his head. Well, now Alex popping up again makes more sense. Unfinished business simmering under the surface. I nodded wearily. In my heart, I knew this was only the beginning. Alex's ego would drive him to keep needling old wounds, trying to tear down the happier life I'd built without him. Well, I was more than ready for the fight now. Alex had no idea what he was provoking. My hands shook as I quietly closed Lila's bedroom door, her sobs still echoing in my ears. At 6 years old, she'd just learned the hard truth. Her father didn't want her anymore. I still wasn't sure what had prompted Alex to suddenly file for full custody. Leela had come home from his weekend visit utterly distraught, clutching the court notice. She'd always been an afterthought for Alex at best, so why this sudden strategic move against me now? I stepped out the front door for air, nausea and anger battling inside me. As if conjured by my despair, a sleek sports car purred up the street right then, gliding to a stop at the curb just beyond my driveway. Jenna. Of course, Alex's blonde assistant turned mistress had come to gloat. I strode up to her lowered window, fury overriding my disgust. Well, hello there, Meredith. Jenna purred, snapping her gum. Long time no see. Her smug gaze traveled over my worn yoga pants and faded hoodie. Rough day? Cut the crap. I crossed my arms, refusing to let her see me ruffled. I'm guessing you're behind this latest stunt from Alex. Does his wife know you're running around town doing his dirty work? Jenna scowled, dropping her faux-friendly act. Good. Maybe if you weren't such a shitty mom, Alex wouldn't have to step in for the sake of your daughter, she snapped spitefully. Red hazed my vision. Without thinking, I reached in and snatched the sunglasses off her surgically perfected nose. Listen very closely, you plastic little homewrecker. My voice lashed like a whip as I leaned down to get in her face. You both may have money and connections, but I have everything to lose, and that makes me dangerous. I crushed her $100 shades in my fist. Now get the hell out of my neighborhood before you regret it. Jenna shrank away, for once stunned silent. I stepped back and let her peel off in a squeal of tires. As her taillights disappeared from sight, The red rage seeped away, leaving me drained and hollow. I trudged back inside with leaden limbs, pausing as my eyes landed on the pile of legal documents awaiting my response. Even just glancing at the logo for Alex's law firm kicked my heart rate up again. This was bad. Alex had the fancy lawyers and privilege on his side. While I could barely scrape rent together some months, he clearly aimed to bury me in legal bills, grinding me down through attrition. Exhausted and beaten down by the day's events, I collapsed onto the couch and finally let the tears fall. Hugging a throw pillow to my chest, I let myself cry in heaving sobs. For Lila's innocence shattered too young, for the years and dreams I'd wasted on Alex, for the injustice of seeing bad people continuously rewarded while the good suffered undeserved misery. A quiet knock at the door startled me. Scrubbing hastily at my face, I peeked out to see Ethan on my doorstep, his expression full of concern. Lila's teacher mentioned there was drama with Alex today and you left upset. I just wanted to come check on you both. He shuffled his feet. I know I'm probably overstepping, but I had to make sure you were okay. A fresh sob rose in my throat at this kindness. I stepped back in a wordless invitation. Ethan hovered uncertainly just inside. I'm so sorry you're dealing with this crap from Alex now on top of everything else. His jaw tightened, a hard glint entering those soft blue eyes. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but sometimes karma takes too damn long with assholes like him. Despite everything, his vehemence surprised a watery chuckle from me. I sank back down onto the couch, suddenly beyond grateful not to be alone in this battle anymore. Thank you for coming by, Ethan. I really needed a friendly face tonight. I wiped my eyes, feeling the tiniest spark of hope flickering back to life inside me. And as for Alex, trust me, his karma is coming, one way or another. I tapped my foot impatiently against the courthouse floor, my nerves stretched thin. Any minute now, I expected to hear the click of Alex's designer shoes stalking up the hall, flanked by his army of suits. But the footsteps that approached were slower, more measured. I looked up and, to my astonishment, saw Ethan striding towards me, looking crisp and confident in a charcoal suit that had to cost more than my car. Ethan, what are you doing here? I stared at him, confused. Ever since becoming an unexpected shoulder for me to lean on these past few turbulent months, Ethan had been nothing short of a godsend. But I couldn't imagine why he'd turned up here today of all days. Wordlessly, Ethan held open the conference room door, gesturing for me to enter first. Bewildered, I stepped inside. My knees nearly buckled with relief at the sight of Lila laughing happily away on Izzy's lap. Alex's attorney sister had a soft spot for my daughter even amidst this legal crossfire. I rushed over, unable to resist sweeping Lila into a fierce hug. Over her shoulder I shot Ethan a questioning look. He gave me a slow smile. I'm your new pro bono legal counsel. Surprise. What? How? I sank weakly down into a chair, dizzy with shock. Ethan sat beside me. I called in a favor from an old friend from my Harvard law days who owed me big time. Once I explained the situation with Alex trying to drown you in legal fees as retaliation, he was happy to help. Well, Iz and I decided to throw dear Alex a curveball this morning. Izzy smirked from across the table. Nothing screws up a bully's game plan like being utterly ignored. I glanced between them, almost giddy with relief. Having Izzy on my side had been a key advantage so far, but with Ethan's high-profile connections on board too, I felt unstoppable. Now, Ethan pulled out an intimidatingly thick folder of documents and turned to me with a smile. Let's talk about preempting every devious maneuver your ex may try. Don't worry about the legal bills anymore, Mir. I want to help protect you and Lila any way I can. His hand covered mine, warm and steadying. My heart gave an odd flutter. I tried to ignore the tiny inner voice pointing out all Ethan's attractive qualities, now amplified tenfold in a suit. There would be time later to analyze whatever was simmering between us lately. For now, I needed to focus on the fight ahead. All right, ladies, let's crush this. Izzy cracked her knuckles dramatically and winked at Lila. Auntie Izzy and Godfather Ethan have a bulletproof battle plan ready for the judge, so your mean old dad doesn't stand a chance. Lila's grin filled me with fierce determination. I would move heaven and earth before I let Alex torment my daughter for his petty games. Not when we finally had a real shot at a stable, happy future now, thanks to Ethan. I knew with bone-deep certainty that I could weather any coming storms with this man by my side. My premonition proved true over the whirlwind legal proceedings that followed. Just as Izzy predicted, Alex failed to make even a ripple fighting against the strategic duo of her and Ethan combined. At last came the bittersweet final signing of divorce papers I'd evaded completing for so long. My hand trembled slightly as I scrawled my name one last time as Meredith Karev. Ethan's steadying grip on my shoulder kept me grounded. As we left the imposing courthouse doors for good, I tipped my face up to the brilliant sunlight with relief. The future lay ahead filled with promise. I could focus on Lila now, on my career, on exploring this surprising new connection with Ethan. The past could finally rest in peace. I turned to Ethan with joyful tears sparkling in my eyes. "It's over. We're free." His answering smile outshone even the dazzling sunshine above. "No, Meredith." He squeezed my hand, his own rare public display revealing the depth of emotion behind that reserved facade. "This is only the beginning." As I hurried down the echoing corridor towards the principal's office, my heart pounded out a frantic beat. The urgent summons from Lila's school ignited all my worst fears. Had Alex overstepped his bounds and caused more trouble? I burst into the room, my stomach knotted into a tangled mess. But the sight behind the imposing oak desk left me speechless. Alex huddled on one chair, suit disheveled and sporting the beginnings of a black eye. Beside him sat Jenna, vainly trying to cover what looked suspiciously like a bite mark marring her exposed shoulder, and standing guard over them both with crossed arms and icy fury blazing in his blue eyes stood Ethan. "Good, you're finally here." Ethan's tone was clipped, a sure sign his anger still simmered below that polished executive surface. "Perhaps you can shed some light on exactly what happened at the playground today, because your ex-husband and his accomplice seem a little dazed on the details." It was only then I noticed Lila tucked against Ethan's side, looking tiny and stressed but physically unharmed. Overwhelming relief at seeing my baby girl uninjured temporarily muted my barrage of questions. I went straight to her and swept her into my arms. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I pulled back to search her face worriedly. I rushed right over as soon as they called me. Lila's lower lip wobbled. "Aunt Jenna and Daddy came when me and Zoe were playing. They started yelling that Zoe's mom was a stupid lying lawyer," she sniffled. "Zoe cried and ran away. I got mad and bit Aunt Jenna." Her voice rose defiantly on the last line. I blinked, impressed despite myself at my daughter's bold defense of her friend. "Yes, and that was very wrong." Ethan smoothed down Lila's hair gently. "We don't settle fights with our teeth, even when protecting people we care about." He shot a reproving look at Jenna, who flushed and looked away. I stood, hands anchored on my hips. "Would someone please explain what the hell is going on here?" I demanded. Behind me, Alex made a disgruntled noise, but wisely stayed silent. Ethan guided me a few steps away and spoke lowly. Apparently Zoe's mother represented Jenna's ex in a nasty divorce, like ripping him off for millions level nasty. His mouth flattened grimly. "I assume they came here today meaning to cause trouble for her through the kids." Red-hot rage flooded my veins. The absolute nerve of Alex and his scheming girlfriend, dragging innocent children into their deranged grudges. I crossed quickly back to Lila, brushing her hair back to meet her eyes intently. "You were so brave defending your friend. I'm proud of you for standing up to bullies." Over her head, I pinned Alex and Jenna with a blistering look promising swift later retribution. Their twin glares bounced off my fury like droplets of rain. Just then the door banged open, admitting a harried woman I recognized as Zoe's mother. Her shocked gaze bounced between our tense tableau, and Lila tucked protectively under my arm. "Mrs. Quinn." Ethan swiftly intercepted her, laying on his polished CEO charm. "Let's step into the hall to discuss the incident from a legal perspective." He put a hand on her back, smoothly guiding her out. Through the window, I watched him work his magic, doubtlessly summarizing events in a light most favorable towards the girls. I focused back on my daughter, letting Ethan handle diffusing the situation his way. My priority stood cradled here in my arms. The rest could come later. "Let's get you home, baby girl." I lifted Lila's chin gently. "I think we've all had enough drama for one day." Her answering, watery smile and tight hug soothed my raging heart. As we left the tense office behind, I sent up a silent prayer of thanks for Ethan. Yet again, he'd raced to our rescue like a dark knight in his sleek black car. And I'd never felt more secure knowing together we could conquer any monsters who dared threaten our peace. The tense silence stretched between us in the aftermath of my furious tirade. Ethan leaned back against the couch, jaw tight as he processed my barrage of bitter revelations. At last, the toxic flood tide of secrets from my past unleashed, I felt hollowed out physically and emotionally. Ethan dragged a hand over his face warily. Jesus, Mir, I'm so sorry you and Lila have shouldered this toxicity alone for so long. That level of obsessive harassment. He shook his head, lines of anger bracketing his mouth. Why the hell haven't you involved the authorities before now? I closed my eyes against the rush of old shame. At first, I just kept hoping if I put my head down and focused on being a good mom, eventually Alex would lose interest when he didn't get a rise out of me. I exhaled shakily. But lately it feels like the floodgates opened. Like now that I'm actually happy again, he's snapped. Ethan reached over and squeezed my hand gently. This cycle of violence stops now, Meredith. No more handling this alone. I'm calling my private security team and a lawyer first thing tomorrow. Then I want to sit down with Lila and explain gently why she won't see her father unsupervised anymore. His eyes tightened with suppressed fury. Whatever it takes, I won't let that volatile bastard near either of you again. Overwhelmed with relief at finally setting down my exhaustive burden, I leaned into Ethan's strength literally and figuratively. Just feeling his solid chest under my cheek unleashed a fresh wave of tears, only this time, cathartic ones. I wept for the naive girl who once loved Alex unguardedly, for the battered woman who broke finally leaving him, for the protective mother hardened into vigilance against his campaign of cruelty. All different versions of myself rendered refugees by one man's destructive obsession. Ethan simply held me through the storm, hands gently rubbing my back. Having witnessed the traumatic genesis firsthand now, he no doubt understood this purge stood long overdue. At last I surfaced, scrubbing the heels of my hands roughly over my swollen eyes. I'm so sorry for dumping all this ugliness into your lap, Ethan, I rasped hoarsely. You deserve better than being saddled with another man's damage. His fingertips nudged my chin up insistently. You have nothing to apologize for. I care about you, both of you, deeply. I'm not going anywhere. His earnest words unlocked something painfully vulnerable in my chest. Before reason could intervene, I leaned forward and pressed my lips desperately to his. Our first kiss held no artifice or sweet romantic pretense, just raw, exposed need meeting steadfast reassurance. Perfect understanding passed soul-deep between us in the charged silence after we finally broke apart. Ethan grazed my cheek lightly with his thumb. We'll get through this fire, Meredith. Together. I covered his broad hand with my own, finally daring to hope again for the first time in years. With Ethan beside me, even Alex's sinister storm clouds seemed surmountable threats rather than looming doom. Bolstered by newfound courage, I hugged Lila close that night and made a silent, solemn vow over her sleeping form. No matter the costs, Alex would never torment my baby again. His twisted attacks ended now, one way or another. Mama Bear had awoken at last to protect and shelter her cub, and not even his savagery could stand against my ferocity for long. All his earlier tempests now seemed paltry preludes to the full hurricane fury I would rain down if Alex dared menace my daughter further. For Lila's sake and mine both, the reckoning had arrived, and not even hell itself held an agony sufficient for unleashing on that miserable man, should he push me too far. I stirred my morning coffee absently, still mentally spinning over the latest unthinkable stunt from Alex. Luring Lila out of school illegally to take her for ice cream without my permission counted as kidnapping in my book, never mind his pathetic arguments about just wanting father-daughter bonding time. My phone buzzed with an incoming call, jolting me from vengeful fantasies of sixing Ethan's security squad on my deranged ex. Speak of the devil, I smiled instinctively, just seeing Ethan's handsome face flash on my screen. Please tell me you have good news on the Alex front, I answered without preamble. Even better. Ethan's smooth voice held a smile. I come bearing gifts of gourmet cupcakes and moral support. Buzz me up? I glanced down at my faded college sweatshirt and messy top knot. Not exactly hostess chic, but then again, Ethan had seen me far more haggard lately. "You're a lifesaver," I sighed, pressing the door release. Moments later, I ushered him inside, unable to resist going up on tiptoes to steal a quick kiss. Ever since that emotionally charged evening when our relationship shifted into romantic territory, I couldn't get enough of Ethan's steadying presence. He held up a box from my favorite bakery, looking unfairly gorgeous, with his slightly rumpled hair and open collar exposing a tantalizing V of skin. "Couldn't have you facing the lawyer on an empty stomach," he winked. I grinned despite my endless Alex-induced headaches. God bless this man. Over lavish red velvet cupcakes, Ethan outlined the injunction paperwork barring Alex from contacting either Lila or me outside official supervised visitation. And if he violates these court orders even once, he'll not only face contempt charges, but also trigger an automatic restraining order. Ethan looked immensely satisfied delivering this news. I could have cried in relief knowing the legal avenues now protected us while the bigger investigation into Alex's shady practices unfolded. Turns out even wealthy corporate executives had limits to flouting the rules under Ethan's watchful eye. Stuffed on cream cheese frosting and justice, I relaxed back with a contented sigh. Hopefully Alex finally realizes he's not exempt from facing consequences. Here's hoping. Ethan stacked our empty plates. Unfortunately, when it comes to ruthless narcissists like your ex-husband, the hard lesson usually requires hammering home a few times. His expression turned serious. "I know you're not scared easily, Meredith, but please promise you'll let my security team handle any direct interactions if Alex approaches you or Lila again." My instinctive stubborn independence bristled slightly at the protective decree, but the earnest love shining in Ethan's eyes wore my reluctance down. I knew his directive came from caring deeply rather than any deliberately heavy-handed male posturing. I lifted our joined hands and brushed a soft kiss over Ethan's knuckles. "I promise, babe. No more stubbornly trying to tackle everything solo." His shoulders relaxed, tension easing from his frame. Our sweet moment got interrupted by Lila bounding through the door, fresh from school, full of chatter about her day. As we listened indulgently to her winding stories, I felt my heart settle into calm, steady rhythm for the first time in forever. The trials of my past with Alex seemed now muted nightmares compared to this luminous present with Ethan and Lila. I'd been running so hard towards imaginary futures before. I missed recognizing the only dreams worth chasing sat right here under this roof, filled with laughter and light. No matter what storms still brewed on the horizon, together we'd shine brightly enough to weather even Alex's bitterest gale forces. This right here already felt like home, the safe harbor I'd fought so desperately to reach through so many dark and frightening nights. At long last, we'd found our way home.